Mm, 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 mm. Okay. According to the tubes, I'm live. The end of some now unfortunately warm Island Punch Spindrift for the working man. Still waiting on that sponsorship, Spindrift. I'm ready whenever you are. Let's see. Well, if you were following along yesterday on the Behind the Screens channel, I had to create, and then I did create a Hobbit character for a one-shot session of The One Ring. Whoops. Whoa. Intel's telling me I need to update something. I'll do that later. That I played in last night. So just to, I guess a couple things to put a bow. So there's on it. There's a good character. Hey, Ian. There's a good character creator I found online, but it's got a problem. I don't really, I'm not playing a bunch of different systems, or I'm not creating characters for them. So I don't know how a lot of the online character creators work, but this one, it will randomize a character for you. And it's got a really good, it's almost, it's free. So I'll say it's worth it. It's worth checking out. It's worth your time because at minimum you can get a form fillable PDF character sheet, which I don't know if you can get one anyway. Maybe they just, Free League's already got one. I don't know. But there's this one here. It's good. But what happens is you can randomly generate a character and it will do everything for you. And you have some drop downs at the top of the page that you could set. So you could pick, like I had to. I was told that, hey, we're playing all Hobbits, which is fine. Great. So you can say just to pick from the Hobbit. I think they call them heroic heritages or something. I have the One Ring book open here. I could probably look it up, whatever they call it. Something after this stuff, something. No. What do they call it? There is a name. Heroic cultures. Sorry. You can pick from your heroic cultures. You can also pick for your calling, kind of your class. And then it will do, but everything after that, it's doing for you as part of its randomization. And that's fine. But when I went into it, I was looking for, okay, I can randomize, get to a base, and then I can start plunking away on the numbers, and it can keep kind of automating because there are some stats that essentially are calculated from other stats. A little bit, I don't want to say confusing, but there's a little bit of stuff going on there. And I was hoping that the character creator would sort of automate that stuff under the hood. But what happens is, and this is just a PDF and it's not form fillable in this state, or it's not, or rather in this Sumatra PDF. Viewer is great for viewing, but it doesn't do the editing stuff. As soon as you change the numbers on the online site, or you want to change which skills using anything like that, you make any changes to the numbers or anything like that, and the automation kind of stops. So what I ended up doing on the stream yesterday is once I realized that, which took me a few minutes, I thought, I'm not knowledgeable enough in the system to start changing things. So I thought, I better just start from scratch. And that worked fine. And I came up with Reginald Roper, who was a Hobbit messenger with very little strength. I think that's pretty much the least you can have. 2 strength, 6 heart, 6 wits. Right. And then I kind of went through and did it. And that was a lot of fun. But one of the things, and it really didn't occur to me, I don't know if it came up on the stream, but it was interesting as I was talking to a couple people on a Discord, the Discord that's related to the game I played in, that, someone mentioned it, and I was thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, it's interesting, the classes. And that's why I'm scrolling through to take a look at the classes, because the classes, I don't know what they're not. They're not bad. They're not horrible. You obviously can play. And the thing is, I get where they're coming from, because what they're looking at with these classes, as I scroll through these callings, is they're basically the things. Like, one of the things I like about the One Ring is you can really see the book or the legendarium coming through. You can see, hey, this is why this is here, because in the books this happened. When the referee of the game yesterday, Frederick, when Frederick would say, hey, there's this thing in the game where as you're taking damage, it essentially is the kind of damage works in a way like encumbrance. And at a certain point and I know other systems do that, right? But at a certain point it literally is to your benefit to remove armor to lessen your encumbrance so you can keep going. It's almost in a way you have to sacrifice your armor in that way, not necessarily permanently, but in terms of protection, because you need to take off that gear. And what he mentioned was, hey, if you remember the movies when Eowyn's fighting the Witch King and she's hurt, and so she takes off her helmet. Or oftentimes in popular media, someone will drop their shield, and you think like, well, that's why the heck are they dropping their shield? But that becomes mechanized, and then, well, the reason they're dropping their shield is that shield, though was protecting them, is making them too weary to fight. So in order to get a little bit of that strength back, they got to lessen the load. They got to drop something, because otherwise they just can't. They can no longer have both the sword and the shield up and still fight. So they got to drop something, and either you drop your sword, in which case you can't really fight anymore, or you have to drop your shield. So, okay, you got to drop your shield or take off your helmet. And it makes a lot of sense. I think it works, but there's a lot of that. You see all that stuff in the game. So you see stuff in these callings that clearly echoes out from the books, but they're also a little bit weird. And my first time really interacting with the game to play, I don't even know because I've read some stuff from the One Ring, and I definitely want to do the Aragorn solo mode at some point, but I don't know if I've ever really delved into the callings, these classes before. But so you get this interesting mix. So I thought, as kind of a prologue, we can sort of look at this, because it did sort of not weigh on me, but it was sort of something I found interesting. So we got the captain, right? And here we have a quote. I love that they use a lot of quotes from the books. Or maybe they're all quotes from the books. But, maybe some from the movies. I don't know. He stood up and seemed suddenly to grow taller. In his eyes gleamed a light, keen and commanding. Hey, Matt. Matt says they've had the One Ring for a while to try solo, but haven't had the time to read through it yet. And good to hear my thoughts on the character creation. All right. Well, Matt, the character creation itself, which I did in that stream on my Behind the Screens channel, which I should probably link to. I'll try to link to it in the show notes. But if you look for Hex Press Behind the Screens, you might see it. I go through the character creation. It's pretty fast, because I had read through some of the rules quite a while ago and still was able to, including kind of talking through it and all the stuff that comes with being on stream, I was able to get it done pretty quickly. And I felt pretty confident about my character. In other words, that I hadn't made a whole bunch of errors or anything. So I think that the process is good, and I'll get into kind of the mechanics and stuff and that part a little bit in a bit. But the character creation was pretty easy. They do a pretty good job in the rules of letting you know what you need to do. You might see me stumble over a couple spots where I wasn't quite sure, but I think for the most part, they don't necessarily tell you what things mean, like the favored. You can favor some things. For example, I took favored travel, courtesy, and stealth. And in the character creation bits, they don't tell you what that means. Like, oh, you can favor them, but they don't tell you what it means. Essentially what it means, which I think I asked pretty much straight away when we started playing, I was like, hey, can you tell me what favored means? Because I didn't do a good job of looking it up on my own, and it wasn't in the character creation bit. And basically when something's favored, you essentially have advantage. It's that you're rolling 2 sets of dice, picking the better one. So it works really well, but it's one of those things that, man, I would have liked in character creation if they told me what that meant, because you really don't have a sense of how powerful. Oh, a favored, is that like a plus? Like, what does it mean? Is it a +1? Is it plus whatever? Ends up being, and I don't know with 12-sided dice how that fluctuates. There's really some interesting math around how advantage works in terms of not only what it adds to your dice on average, but it actually changes depending on kind of what number you're at to begin with and what the target is. There's some interesting stuff about it. And there was somebody who did a really good video walking through the mathematics behind advantage, which is super interesting, but I have no idea how that works. I have just the barest grasp of how it works with a 20-sided die, and then you flip it to a 12-sided die, and all bets are off, really, what it means, other than, of course, it's good. You'd rather have advantage than not have advantage. Anyhow, so we have this captain, right? He stood up, keen eyes, commanding, there's light. Okay, great. And the description gives you, when the world is on the brink of ruin, it is the duty of all individuals of war to rise and take the lead, whatever the risk. You have chosen to put your judgment in the service of others to guide them in this dark hour. But you don't want others to heed your commands out of fear or obedience. You want them to follow you because they trust you. This is great, but to me, it's not I think of calling as a class, okay? To me, that's a quality, maybe something you develop. In my imaginings, when I imagine you reach a level, say a hero, and I know they don't really quite use levels, they have some other things, but this is something you develop. Like the hobbits, potentially when they come back from at the end of Lord of the Rings, I think they all have that to some degree. I know I think there are quotes about I should have had. I didn't have the wherewithal to look it up beforehand. Of Merry or Pippin. I don't think Frodo because he's kind of in that post PTSD. Hey, retro familiar. PTSD kind of thing with the wound and the ring, and so he's kind of in a different space. But definitely, Merry and Pippin, they are literally taller, and they definitely have this aura of command, and it's like they developed some of that from hanging out with Aragorn and obviously being through the whole experience of the War of the Ring. They've got this sort of thing. I don't look at this as a class that you have like, hey, I just somehow I'm in the Shire or whatever, and I'm a captain. Like, to me, it seems almost more like something you would develop. And in your character sheet, they have these things, they call them rewards and virtues. To me, being a captain is one of these virtues where you have enough experience and such that you are doing. So it's an interesting choice to make that a class, because it really feels like, well, how does Aragorn, for example, which I think would be a captain. I think you can look at Faramir and even maybe Boromir as being captains potentially, but it's not something that they just had from. I know that in Tolkien, a lot of stuff does get wrapped up in kind of your birthright and stuff, but I imagine that, look, not every steward or every whatever had these qualities. Not every ranger has these qualities. Clearly, Aragorn, some of these ones have it. Were they just born with it? Like, well, that's Aragorn because he's Aragorn and he just had the captain calling from birth? Or did he develop it? He had maybe these things latent inside, but maybe we all do, and we develop upwards. It's an interesting thing, but to me, it's an interesting choice to be a class, so to speak. It's like, no, you are a captain and it's kind of what you are, versus it being something anybody, so that, you can't be a champion and develop into this kind of captain stuff, even though it feels like you should be able to. Or as a wizard, like Gandalf, he has some of that quality too, but obviously he's not but someone like him, he's not like, where would, he's a whole different thing, right? But someone like him could be a captain, but you could also see him as being something else. And it doesn't seem like you could have both. So it's just an interesting choice for a class. So then you have the champion, which I think, and this is where it also gets a little bit funny to me, a little bit interesting. And so the champion is more or less, seems like your warrior type of fighter, right? You are, what's the quote? War must be while we defend our lives against a destroyer who would devour our all. Hey, Terrence, Commandolf? Yeah, maybe. So, the champion seems like your kind of fighter, warrior type. Great, we got to fight evil. Okay. I played a messenger. Again, a messenger also seems pretty straightforward in that, hey, we're literally a messenger. It's not some kind of metaphysical thing about what we can do with our brethren, how we can raise people. No, literally you were sending messages, and people have to send messages, and it happens all the time in the books, things. Hey, you got to send a message. Here's the quote. Elrond is sending elves, and then we'll get in touch with the Rangers, and maybe with Thranduil's folk and Mirkwood, right? You're sending out people. They can also be, I don't imagine it, but I imagine they could have also had sort of a scout thing, because also Elrond also, when they're in Rivendell, one of the things that they do is they send out a bunch of scouts to see which passes are open and what's going on, and they actually have to wait quite a while. It doesn't take up that much time in the books, but literally in time passing, it's like a month or maybe even a couple months where they're waiting for these scouts to come back. Anyway, somebody like that. That's great, but it's kind of like your it's akin more to your occupation. A class is sort of an occupation, or like, here's the thing that you do, as opposed to the captain, which seems to be a bunch of qualities that you have and an effect you have. And yeah, you want to do, but I think lots of people probably want to be leaders and help and do that stuff, but they've kind of put that in a specific lane, if you will. And then you have the scholar, also makes sense. You're studying stuff. Treasure hunter also. So you have this mix, I guess, in the warden. So you have this mix of things that are like, yeah, I get these because these are kind of what you do in the world. And then and then this one outlier, the captain, who is this, I don't know, like, I am the leader. And so it's, it's interesting with that, how that works. And I don't know, and I don't think we had a captain, I don't recall. So I don't know, or at least it never came up. So it might be something that doesn't come up. And someone else had mentioned in that same Discord how they felt like one of the things that was missing is you don't feel, the Lord of the Rings, the journey, right, are these hobbits that are essentially normal folk, to use the kind of D&D OSR term, right? They're normal types. And they go out and then they develop into these heroes that they are at the end of the War of the Ring. And this kind of doesn't give you that particular thing, because you're starting off at level 1 with something. Like, you've already decided you are an adventurer and you are doing these things. And how are you being an adventurer? It's one of these. And not that it's good or bad, but I do think there would have been space for almost some kind of if not a funnel, because this is not the kind of game I think where it's fun to lose a whole bunch of people. Or really, that's what you want to do. It's not the flavor of the Lord of the Rings to send out 20 hobbits and come back with 2, and one of them is your main character. But some kind of funnel where you take these 0 levels, a 0 level kind of normal hobbits. They go with some adventure into the old forest. They witness something, whatever, and then they pick up something. I feel like there's a little bit of a missed opportunity there to have something like, hey, especially when you're playing the hobbits, but even everybody else except for maybe rangers, because they kind of seem like from birth they just have to be rough and tough and adventurers. I feel like if any people were starting off at level 1, even for their normal types, it would be rangers. And I guess you could maybe argue elves and dwarves too, but certainly for hobbits, that there's like, hey, you go on your normal hobbits, you go on some kind of call to adventure kind of thing where you get kind of like Bilbo. Bilbo starts off in The Hobbit as just normal dude, ends up having adventures and comes back changed, and that changes him to be more adventurous. And the game, and maybe there's probably good reasons for it, starts off with you're a hobbit that's already adventurous as opposed to having that gateway. But I think as a fan coming from the books or even maybe the movies, you kind of might miss that moment of, well, when did my hobbit, I want to play through the moment where they step over the threshold, when they find themselves seeing elves going towards the Grey Havens, and it sparks this adventurous side to them. You kind of don't have that, and I don't even know if it's really a bad thing. It's a choice, obviously, but I think having gone through and talked and made my character think about it, I was like, yeah, that is something, right? Because you kind of have to look at this hobbit maybe in a way you're not used to from the way you think of hobbits in the books and movies, because there are essentially some population of adventurous hobbits, which is not really something in the books, but obviously it's a game. You're not going to play stay-at-home hobbits, and so it kind of makes the situation where it maybe feels a little bit different. I don't know if that makes sense. Terrence says a hobbit funnel, high stakes pie eating contest. Yeah, that's it. You realize, or something like, I don't even know what it would be. And I think as a referee, you could do this. I don't think this is something that, of course, it would have been nice if they thought about it with the game, but I think you absolutely could have something like this. We're saying, hey, don't pick anything. Just pick some equipment. A whole bunch of stuff fell over. Just pick some equipment, and we're going to play through everything. We're going to play a certain bit. We're going to do sort of a starter thing before you go and get your class. And we'll put some things down, and then you can go. I mean, I think it would work. Maybe I'll have to, I don't know what I don't know, maybe Freely can steal that idea and do it, or, but something like that. And in fact, what I guess we'll start getting into is the adventure. The thing that I played through would actually be kind of an interesting funnel situation. But making the character works well. I think the game mechanically, and we didn't play through all the mechanics, and that's one of the issues, not with the game or with and I don't know what they call the referee keeper, what I'm just going to use referee with, and it's not the referee who also, this is their adventure. Nothing to do with that. It's just the nature of the one shot is you don't tend to get to do everything. And even if you get to do everything, it's going to be short, right? We played from, I don't know, once everyone got their characters and everything set up, maybe 6:30 to 8:30. So only about 2, I think it was about 8:30, maybe 9 or 9:30. I don't know. So we only had between 2 and 3 hours, somewhere in there to play. So shorter than, your average con type session, right? We're all new. So there's a little bit of slowness there in terms of getting things started. There's a lot of, and this is what I mentioned to Frederick, at the referee after the game. I said that one way you could maybe just, if you wanted to speed things up a little bit, is we had a little bit of the meet in the inn kind of thing, which I don't have a problem with. I mentioned before, I think sometimes it's almost underrated. Like you don't have to do everything like in the middle of the action, but I think sometimes it helps to not have to come up with the reasons where we have to have those conversations like, oh, I've got, this or that. Like, will you help me? Will you help me? And it's fine. And I think it can work if you have a really strong, and it can be a lot of fun too, if you have a lot of strong characterizations and people want to lean into it. But there's other times where it's just like nobody really knows. I think we don't, like I made my character and Frederick actually come up with some really neat little backstory for my family. and stuff, because he asked me like, well, what farthing do you live in? And I was like, I hadn't even thought about like where he lives, and I just came up with something, and then he riffed on that. It's like, oh yeah, and your family's here, and the reason why your name is Roper is because they're rope makers in the South Farthing. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. And I'm a messenger, which is why I said that I live in the West Farthing, because that's where the main post office is. And it was like, boom, it worked out really well, right? But for some of the other folks that, and even for myself, not have a super, I wasn't super internalized with everything. That, it's, I think you could maybe just make it a little bit more streamlined by just saying, hey, instead of going through that, like just say like you're already on the case kind of thing. In our case, the situation was that, so we had a ranger, myself, a hobbit messenger, and a couple, so we had all hobbits and a ranger. So it was me and two other hobbits, and then the ranger. I don't remember, and I think actually a good thing with the system is that it didn't really come up at all like your calling. Like we weren't wearing our callings on our sleeve, and there wasn't a lot of like, haha, well, I'm the so and so. Like we were all just playing and just trying stuff and doing stuff. And I actually like that it's not immediately obvious kind of what you are. Maybe some people wouldn't like it. I don't know. I don't think anybody felt like someone was stepping on their toes. It's only a one shot, so we didn't have a chance to do a whole bunch of stuff. But it didn't feel like anybody was like, oh, I can't, like there's that two things. Like one, maybe someone can say, well, I didn't feel spotlit because, I'm not into that spotlight kind of stuff anyway, but I wasn't spotlit enough. Okay. But I, like I said, I don't put a lot of stock into that, but I think everyone felt like they could act in any moment without them feeling like they're in the dark. Ian asked that we were playing something homebrewed, not published. Correct. As far as yes, I think, and I don't know if they took something published and tweaked it around or if it was all from whole cloth, but yes, I'm pretty sure, what they made was their own creation, but I don't know if they took elements, because I think you mentioned something that they might have taken some pieces from something published. They had both the starter kit and so they had the box set and the core rulebook, and I don't know if they pulled stuff out of there, but I'm pretty sure in terms of at least the everything, the adventure was homebrew, but they may have used some things, pulled some ideas or some elements from something that was published. I don't know. I haven't read through the scenario, so I'm not sure. Oh, Ian says that the starters box has an Oops All Hobbits adventure. Oh, that makes sense because I think the starter kit basically has the Shire stuff in it. So that totally makes sense. But yeah, and that definitely might have been the intent. I don't think the intention was. I think his intention was always to run something that he had at least modified to suit his own ideas and desires and stuff. Excuse me, but I think his original plan was for us to all be hobbits, and one player ended up bringing a ranger, and he just kind of tweaked it on the fly to make it fit. I have the starter kit. I could look. Let's see. I've got the starter kit. This is the Shire. I don't know if it's got. I know it doesn't look like it's got an adventure in it. I don't think. So I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know. I could look at it later and see. Hey, Croco. So I like that it wasn't like I am the fighter and I am the cleric and I am the wizard, and we all kind of sit in our respective corners of the pie chart of abilities. We were all just doing stuff. However, I was a messenger, and I guess to get into the actual scenario. So I was delivering a message to one of the hobbits about them being told that their niece was missing. So, and actually, I think there's a map in here. Which I can use. I thought there was a map somewhere. Oh, but it's on the side. Hold on a minute. And this might not be actually very helpful. Yeah, especially because it's twisted. So I think that we were all up, and I think the way it started is I'd been given a message to deliver, and I think we were up here. Where is that? Is I'm going to zoom in and it's going to get higher res or not. I can't tell what that name is supposed to be. No, that's it. It's as good as you're getting. Okay. I think we were somewhere. It's not resolving it. All right, never mind. There's some really nice maps in the box set, which I have, but I'm not. The box set's kind of away, so I'm not going to pull it. I believe we're up in the north farthings where I delivered this message to one of the fellow hobbits. Hey, your niece is missing. You got to come back and help us, kind of thing. All right, that's for him. Then I think another hobbit was there who was, I think, either a friend of his or I think a friend of the other hobbits. So basically, two of the hobbits were sort of, their stories were kind of, they were together, they knew each other, friends, and oh, hey, you got a message from home, your niece is missing. The ranger had gotten word from a couple of other rangers that the South Farthing was potentially under attack, that numbers of Dunlendings were had overrun their position at Sarn Ford, because the Rangers are basically watching Sarn Ford, which is it's not on this map. It's the very furthest south part. I don't think there's a bigger map. Furthest south part of the map. I think there's a map here, but I don't know if it'll be helpful. And they're coming up. These Rangers were injured, so he essentially, hey, you got to go and take down, or and figure out what's going on. And then basically that kind of awkward thing of, hey, you kind of random, not so random hobbit fellow, well, he's a human, fellow types, come with me. And of course, it's the call to adventure, and we're not going to say no. Well, the Shire's right in the... Yeah, so if we come down here... Oh, okay. So basically, we're up here somewhere. Actually, we're up here, maybe Hobbiton, maybe, or somewhere. And he'd gotten word that, oh, hey, we're being overrun by Dunlendings down here, and the missing girl was around here somewhere. Croco says there's no ranger calling. Well, no, the ranger is actually a people. So unlike in D&D, the Rangers actually are refer to the former Arnorians, those folk, literally the descendants of the folk of Arnor, who were mostly wiped out by the Witch King in those wars, and are kind of hanging on a remnant, and Aragorn being the people. So that is one of the heroic lineages or heritages or whatever they call it. You can be a ranger, and then you can be one of the other things. So I don't know whether he was a ranger captain or a ranger treasure hunter or a ranger messenger, so on and so forth, right? I imagine he was maybe a captain, but I don't know. The captain stuff didn't come up as such. So okay, so right, great. So we got to do that. So actually, the one, and this is not a bad thing. So the one decision point that I had, and I one thing I liked about this is Frederick pulled out the big nice map, and it is a really nice map. We didn't use the journey stuff, which is probably one of the things that, and this is again the nature of a one shot, and the fact that we're playing in the Shire, which may be because he was using stuff from the starter set. I don't know. I'd have to look at it, and I'd have to delve in there a little bit more. We didn't really get to do much journeying with using the hex map. Because when you're journeying, and I looked at this a little bit on the stream yesterday, because when I was statting out my character, and I was like, oh, a messenger going in the wilds, and I think Croco asked, oh, hey, how does that, if you take the travel skill or something, what does he have? He's got, if you take the travel skill, like, what does that mean? And it has to do with the travel phase, and you're going through, and you're doing stuff, but that travel phase we didn't really do. But what I did do is I had to pick a path. I didn't have to, but I did. It's like, okay, and we could have. There were a couple of ways to go because we were up here somewhere, and it was like, okay, we can kind of come around down and then shoot over. We ended up kind of coming around down and coming this way, and there's some roads you can't see it because on this main map, but between these roads there are smaller roads and there are settlements, and we sort of came down and kind of got down like that. And it worked fine. And I rolled really well on my travel roll. And just to get into the mechanics, everything is 12-sided dice and 6-sided dice. The 12-sided dice are your main rolls. And then 12s are critical, like your critical hits, but 11s are critical misses. They're like getting a double one, if you want to look at it that way. That's how Frederick says, like, like double ones, 11, that's really bad. So you want a 12, but you don't want 11, which is really intriguing too, right? It's better to get literally a 1 on the D12 than an 11. So interesting. I didn't roll any 11s. I don't know if anybody rolled any 11s, if it came up. And then how these pips or these little check marks, these boxes work, is for each box you have, you get to roll a D6 and add it on to your add them together. So you roll your D12, you roll for travel, roll D12, and then roll 3D6s, and you add all that stuff together, and you're pretty much trying to surpass the target numbers. Part of what was a little bit opaque to me, and I think part of it might have been the way Frederick is just running the game, and part of it is I don't know if I'm always going after this heart target number, or if there are target numbers for different things. So I would generally just say the number, and he would let me know whether it was a success or not. I think that's something I'd like to just by, I think, playing the system a little bit better. And I think maybe I would say that, hey, if you're running this with new players, just maybe, unless there's a real reason why the target number needs to be hidden, just say what the target number is. I think it just helps. And I think also it helps, especially if you're trying to figure out what to do. So you're looking at the difficulty. So for example, maybe you can do something stealth, or you can do something, let's say I can do something stealth, or I can use travel, right? Maybe I'm not sure what, I'm trying to go across the landscape, and you could argue that, well, I'm not going to leave traces because I'm going stealthily. And you could maybe argue that I'm not leaving traces because I know the trails and I know where to go, right? Some way to, and I don't know if there's a way you could combine them. There are things I just don't know about the system. If there's a way like, you need to be stealthy and the travel skill, or you pick one or the other, right? And I don't know if picking those two, just generically, if there should be different target numbers. I don't know. A situation, for example, let's just say this didn't come up in the game, but let's just say, okay, well, I'll use the other map just as better. There's swampy stuff here, and I'm trying to get through the swampy stuff, and I'm trying to get there kind of stealthily. So I could take the argument like, okay, well, you can go stealthy, and that's what the stealthy is doing, is saying, all right, I'm prioritizing not leaving big holes in the muck where I'm stepping and stuff, but it's also, in a sense, more difficult. I have a higher chance of getting lost because I'm not paying as much attention to finding my way as I am to being stealthy. Or I could go travel, and you reverse that. Well, I'm gonna have better way of getting through, but there's more of a chance of leaving my tracks. And maybe depending what you're trying to do, right, you might say there's different target numbers, and what happens with those extra dice you're rolling is if you're rolling 6s, those can be kind of special effects. So if I rolled a bunch of 6s on my travel, I could say, I'm going to use some of those to be stealthier, right? Or I could use them to get past my target number, I think, the target number. And of course, the same thing with stealth. So if you have a lot of stealth and a little bit of travel, you might take your chance and say, hopefully I'll roll some 6s and I can put that into my travel so I don't get lost. Or if I have a lot of travel, I can put those 6s in the stealth. That's really neat. I like it. And it's kind of, I wasn't thinking about it, but it's similar to my system, that my game, where I have a dice pool and you can use successes and you can kind of do things differently. But I think for me, especially starting out, I didn't know, well, am I rolling against my target number? Am I rolling against another target number? And what those target numbers are to know if I should use those. And maybe it's supposed to be like, I can use those 6s, which will obviously, when I sum it together, give me a much better number, and I'm trying to roll over. Or should I pull a 6 back because I don't need it and say, okay, I'm going to pull this one back to give me an extra stealthy. That part of the system was a little bit opaque to me. And I think part of that is Frederick was playing it kind of, which I like, kind of loose and conversational. But I think as a new player, especially, I think if you're a referee, maybe give a little bit more of the structural mechanical part so that we can make sure that we're sort of on the same page with our decisions. And I got the sense that some of the other people were maybe struggling with that too, or just weren't really interfacing with that part as much as they might have, because we really didn't understand kind of what we were doing in a way. And I don't know from experience how that's supposed to be. Should it be that we always know the target numbers? Are they always the target numbers? Is it basically just a fixed target number? So, I rolled a 12 and I rolled a 6, a 4, and a 2. And I know my target number for heart is 14. So the 12 and the 2 already get me there. So I can take that 6 and use it. Like, I just wasn't quite sure about it. And I haven't gone back and looked at the rule book yet to see kind of how I should have been playing it. And that's just a little bit of being unfamiliar with the system. But I felt like just if you take that level away from it, just the doing the stuff with the D12s and stuff was very easy and easy to read. And I think we all pretty much quickly grokked that, okay, roll a D12. How many pips do you have? Then roll some successes and then basically just call out the number. Oh, I rolled an 18. Oh, I rolled a 16 or whatever. And like I said, maybe that we could have even been faster if we could have just said, if I knew that we were always rolling for our own personal target numbers, that could even been quicker and been like, oh yeah, I passed my target, or I didn't pass my target, oh I passed my target and I'm going to use this 6 for this, or whatnot. You understand what I'm saying? Does that make sense? So there's a lot of it where just that experience part and kind of a little bit better understanding the rules would have helped, but it didn't hinder the game. I just don't know if I didn't miss some extra things interactions I could have made because I was missing that part of it. Crocodile asked if the Wandering Madness came into play. No, no one's madness came into play. They only picked up a couple of shadow points. And that's another thing in which maybe this game, the One Ring, I don't know if you're going to get the fullest out of it in a one shot, especially if it's just a couple of hours, because there's some things like hope and what is it? Hope and shadow that are these resources, and even I guess endurance as well, that are resources that get diminished. Or in shadow you gain shadow, and then hope and endurance get diminished through things, right? And it's just the nature of it, because we're playing essentially one kind of thing. Unless you really get hit with a bunch, it's not really going to matter. You're never going to be at that point where you're going. It's like if you're, I guess similar would be that if you're playing a one shot of Call of Cthulhu, if you're starting off with full, and I imagine it maybe someone would say, well, if I'm playing a one shot of Call of Cthulhu, I'm going to make sure your insanity or whatever, it's already pretty close to being insane, so that your decisions in this one shot are more fraught. In our case, starting fresh, some of that stuff just didn't come into play because we didn't have enough opportunities to be tested and to have those resources start to be diminished, and so have those things being called into question, if that makes sense, right? There's just these things that it seems like, and maybe there's a scenario if we were doing a travel thing where we had more mishaps and stuff that could, in those ways, degrade some of those resources. Maybe that would have been an opportunity, but our scenario didn't have that. So I would maybe say if I was running a One Ring kind of one shot, maybe I would have you do a travel thing, or I would start you with already diminished resources so that you do get to play with that a little bit more. But that's something you kind of pick up as you're going. And that might be thinking like, oh yeah, if I was going to run this and I was going to do it now, knowing what I know, and of course I would want to know even more and read the rules, I might go, oh yeah, maybe I'll start like they've already gone through some stuff. So their hope is down, their endurance is down, they've got some shadow, and that way it feels more like they're at these crux points in their characters. But when you're fresh and you only playing through a bit, and we're not playing at a pace where we're going to tackle a whole bunch of stuff, it becomes a little bit, and I think you can probably imagine, I'm sure not everyone, but I'm sure a lot of folks have played games where there's similar things that, like, hey, you're playing a one shot and you have all these, if you have all these, say, once a day kind of powers, you got a bunch of them, you kind of think like, well, I'm just going to blow through, I'm going to Nova all my once a day stuff because I don't have to really worry about other days because we're playing a scenario, all takes place in one day, that kind of thing. So didn't have to worry about the Wandering Madness, which is that shadow path, which I think comes into effect, I think, once you start reaching thresholds of shadow, which we never got to because we're playing one shot. So we get off to where we're trying to get to, which is somewhere in this area called Wold's End. And we talk to a few people, and we meet up with the one Hobbit's family, and they tell us, we did meet up with some dwarves also who mentioned and I don't remember if they confirmed that they had run across some Dunlendings, or just confirmed the strangeness of a bunches of Dunlendings, because it really is like big numbers coming up through the fort. So either way, it was just like, okay, we got some confirmation that it's unusual. So we press on, we get to Wold's End, we meet with the family, and like, yeah, she's been missing. And then also, by the way, this stuff with the Dunlendings, they've only seen a couple. And the interesting thing too is that we really didn't pay it off, or we didn't figure out how it matched it, but they'd only seen a couple in the town itself. And those few were actually peaceful. They were trying to trade, I think, or maybe buy stuff. They weren't violent and bloodthirsty trying to murder everybody, which was interesting, but we didn't get to follow, or we didn't get to. We simply didn't follow up on that lead, maybe to the extent we should have, potentially. But they also mentioned seeing lights in the woods. So if I zoom in a little bit more here before it gets too pixelated, there are some woods, and I don't know if Frederick just added this in, but I think in the more zoomed in map, it shows more. There are woods that are on the near side of the river. So we know there's the Brandywine, and we didn't have to cross the Brandywine. There are some woods that end up over here, and folks had sighted lights in the woods. And that became the main focus of the adventure. Like, okay, we were thinking, all right, it's probable that the disappearance of the girl, the appearance of the Dunlendings is potentially, it seems like something that would be connected, high probability, right? So let's see what's going on. So that night, we arrived sometime during the day, and we talked to a couple of people. We have some meals because we're hobbits. And we're like, all right, at night, we're going to sneak on over here. We're going to see if we can check out these lights in the woods. We rolled really well for the lights in the woods, and it turned out that there are whole bunch of Dunlendings in here, but it's not a war party of Dunlendings. It seems like they're bringing whole families up. There are kids up. And in fact, I wasn't part of I was kind of more of an Overwatch type spot. And so I didn't go in with the sort of main scouting mission, which was two of the hobbits, the other two hobbits. I was hanging back, I think, with the ranger, and they were able to get, they were able to get so close that they actually were mistaken for Dunlending children at one point. So they got to really see things. So what they saw, one, is that there are families around because there are Dunlending children running around, which means that this is like a bigger, and they also realized it's a bigger gathering. I think we'd seen, what I have in my notes here, at least 30 torches in the forest, but there actually was a lot more. And it's all big folk, but it's not a war party. It's not really a camp. And there's a barrow here. And they're all kind of gathered. The barrow is the kind of the center point of this gathering of Dunlendings. And as they're watching, this ghostly form emerges out of the barrow and starts singing this song. And the song was about, I think, a king named what did they write down his name is? Dunaval. And it talks about basically the upshot of the song is kind of a song of conquest, a song of regaining what was once lost. And it is, I guess he must be or at least the Dunlendings here feel a kinship. It was clear that they are responding to this song, and that the song is kind of pushing them to do things like, oh, you know what? Hey, probably we should probably come and take this area, right? This used to be ours, and we should take it again, kind of thing. Graco says, big folk, big gatherings. Pretty much. This was ours once. This should be ours again, sort of thing. Which we're going, uh-oh, that's no good. This is bad. But no sign of the niece of the one PC Hobbit. And by the way, I think that particular player, their Hobbit was a treasure hunter. And the reason why I know that is because they had very little interest in their niece. They had a whole lot of interest in finding treasure, which led me to believe that they were really taking that treasure hunter calling to heart. Because they were like, oh, we had to remind them about their niece. They're like, oh yeah, like, has anyone seen any treasure in those woods? And we're like, hey, what about your missing niece? He'd say, oh, yeah, I definitely want to find her too. But, treasure. So it was pretty easy to surmise from that, okay, he's looking at that treasure hunter calling and just going, tilting that thing to 11. Treasure hunter for days. Not so much not a family hobbit. Treasure, right? Big treasure, small in terms of honoring or, really seeing family obligations. So, okay, we got this intel. All right. Like gathering of Dunlendings. So now we know, right? They're coming up through the Sarn Ford, which was kind of obvious, but we knew that they were coming through in force because these other rangers had been injured, which is why they recruited the Ranger PC to go down. It's like, hey, we're hurt. They beat the crud out of us, so you got to go. Go back and hold the line, drive them back, do whatever. And so now we'd seen, all right, here is where this Dunlane, they're coming up through the Sarn Ford. Here's where they're coming, and here's kind of why. We don't know. We never figured out, and maybe it's not really to be known how this whole thing started with the, what's caused. We did figure out some of it, but I don't know what the connective tissue is between the shrine being, or this barrow being activated and the Dunlendings being attracted to it, but they were, and now they're here, and they're a threat. It's like that powder keg that's going to explode because they're here, they're gathering, but at some point, who knows when that song is going to click or the song's going to change, and they're going to go, yep, it's time, and they're going to come rampage out. And in fact, the hobbits in the town, or the village, maybe I should say is a better word, seem to have a sense that obviously there was people coming or big folk around that shouldn't be here. So they were actually putting up a palisade wall when we showed up. So let's see. So we figured that stuff out. We come back. It ended up that there was something with time. There was a little interesting time thing where they were gone most of the night, the scouting party, but it only felt like to them it was a short time, but for us it was a longer time. And this is where I have my note about time dilation, but it seems like maybe there was an enchantment sort of thing, right? They're in the enchantment of this. And, I think meta-wise, we're like, oh, there's a barrow white, right? It's a barrow, there's a thing coming out. Okay, that's a white. I don't know that our hobbits really knew what the heck a white was. I don't know how much whites as a thing are known to hobbits in the Shire. Especially ones that, Bilbo, I think where this takes place in the time frame, I forget where Frederick said it, but it's actually, I think, before The Hobbit. So, even Bilbo didn't really know, hadn't been there to even come back and tell stories yet. So I don't know, who knows? In any case, we're like, okay, we got to do something about this barrow, because this white or ghostly presence, whatever you want to call it, it's not good for us, and it's not going to stop. Like, they apparently are more coming, and they're going to reach some critical mass, and then it's going to explode. And unfortunately, at least who knows how far they would spread, but certainly Woodwold or Wold's End rather, and this part of this farthing will definitely bear the brunt of it. And they're not going to be able to, they're not going to be able to take it. Most hobbits are not fighting folk, and they're, whatever, even before. And I know the hobbits, they have this reputation, at least after the Lord of the Rings, are kind of from the, hey, they're actually harder than you might think, but these folks, they're going to get overrun, and maybe later they'll be able to take it back or hold the line or something. But, a lot of folks are going to die, right? A lot of hobbits are going to lose their lives and lose their land and whatnot in their homes. So, okay, so what can we do? So we decide, we go back, we sort of regroup, and the next day we go back to the barrow, see if we can get inside. And when we get there, the most of the folks who are encamped hanging around here have gone off to do foraging and whatnot, because they're not actively stealing and pillaging from the Shire. So they're obviously getting any and all they can from the wild areas here. And maybe they're stealing some, but not enough to be that it's been remarked upon yet. So they're all off, but they've left a couple of guards out front of the barrow. I decide to be the decoy. So we kind of set up, and here you can see I don't need the map anymore. If I zoom in to my handy drawing here, you can see we kind of positioned. So we positioned where the couple of them got behind the barrow, one side of the barrow. There's an entrance here. I kind of come out of the woods. I made a bunch of noise. One of the guards runs after me, and I take them on a merry goose chase through the woods. One of the guys that I believe was the ranger gets on top of the barrow. There's no entrance on top, and this confirms that it was a ghostly presence and not some dude, because the white had risen. I know my drawing has them coming out of the side, but really had risen kind of coming out of the top of the barrow, and well, there's no hole. So that kind of confirms that it's not something natural. Comes down to try to kind of take care of the one remaining guard. It doesn't work out cleanly. They get into a fight. These guys come around, but they end up getting this guy down essentially, and then they run into the barrow. This kind of entrance here. They race in there. They go down what seems to be a long corridor towards a pale light, and they end up in this room where there's a sarcophagus. and then the white kind of spirit comes out of the sarcophagus and then fades into some armor and weapon. There's sort of like a setup, like where I forget what they call it, where they had the armor and, accoutrements hanging up, and it's able to sort of, which is a neat moment where it sort of kind of rises up out of the sarcophagus and kind of glides into the armor and into wherever the armor stuff is. It's kind of hanging on something that basically has a human, has that kind of shape, and sort of slides into its shape and then has its armor and stuff. And a fight commences. And it's saying, give me my ring, you have my ring. And of course, we don't know anything about it. We're like, we don't know anything about your ring, but we're in a fight now. So at some point, the guard gives back and starts coming back. I trail it back, the guard back. I get a good arrow shot on the guard at the back. The ranger's still kind of out here. The two hobbits had gone in already. Between my arrow shot and which kind of knocked him down, the ranger kind of finishes the job and then drags the bodies inside. I hang out here because I was afraid, because we had made some rolls and stuff. I was afraid, and the sentries were screaming that Dunlendings would come. So I was kind of waiting in the tree line here to see if I could pick off Dunlendings, or at least hold them off to give them more time. Didn't end up working that way, but it's fine. But it delayed my coming in, and the ranger got delayed a little bit. So there was a little bit of sort of two hobbits coming in. Then the white sort of arises. Then the ranger shows up. The rangers and one of the hobbits are mostly doing battle with the white. They tried to sing the song, like the hobbits who had been at the Rising had heard the song enough to kind of sing it. So they tried to do something with the song, which is interesting, which is sort of change the words or do something to try to appeal to the white, to kind of placate it through the song. But that didn't work. But I really liked the idea of it. And then when the ranger was fighting him, he tried to, because the song talks about the ring, also talks about the golden torque that it's wearing, and a couple things. And he tries to knock those off, like these things, these kind of elements of leadership and power. He's like, maybe if I knock the torque off, that will do the trick. It didn't, but it was like a really good idea. But they ended up beating the white, and towards the end of the fight, I came in and I was trying to open sarcophagus to see if I could do something there to sort of get the white to dissipate, to ruin it. That didn't work either. And then, but we do end up taking the white down. Now the problem is we left without really checking around the thing. I didn't do a good job of scouting the room, which I should have, at least after the white came down, to see if there was any alcoves or anything like that. It turned out there was a secret door that we didn't spot, or a concealed door where the girl was, but we were kind of running out of time also. And so we kind of got in this race against the clock. We're trying to wrap up the scenario. So we sort of did a bunch of stuff really quickly, which was that, okay, we're leaving. The Dunlendings are finally showing up as we're exiting the barrow. We're able to escape from them, but now the Dunlendings are really mad, and we're back at the town, and we're thinking like, okay, what are we going to do? Because the Dunlendings are really pissed off, and if we basically had a choice of either we stay in the town and we die in some kind of horrible bloodbath as the Dunlendings come from revenge against people who are not equipped to take them on, and there's not nearly enough of us, and there's a bunch of them, and they're really pissed, or we convince everybody to evacuate. And that's what we did. Now, if we'd had more time, we would have run another one of these mechanics called the Council, where you do kind of a social encounter where you're trying to have and this again is trying to mirror stuff in the books with, like, the Council of Elrond, or where they'd come take counsel with Sauron, and right, there's always things like I will have counsel, I will speak. I have to go find this person. We're going to have a big talk about it. And I think that's a really cool idea. And I'm interested to see that mechanic and how it works mechanized, as opposed to just doing it in a role-playing sense. But we didn't get to do it because it was like, all right, we're gonna do that, but we're gonna have to fast forward through it because we're out of time. It's like, okay, we evacuate the people. The Dunlendings pillage the town, but then they end up leaving. So they burned down the town, but we didn't have any loss of life, and we were able to come back. And then at some point, since the power of the white dissipated, the girl kind of wakes up and is able to leave the tomb. And when we'd come back, it was too late to do anything about it, but we found out that one of the hobbits in town had maybe, I don't know if they literally activated the barrel, but they certainly set in motion at least part of it by stealing the ring that was in the barrel, which had belonged to the barrow white. And so, the ending wasn't as clean and neat as maybe we would have liked it, but it's just a factor of, we just didn't have, there's not quite enough time. But I think that ultimately probably the scenario, especially if you, different, I find this when I'm running, my adventure, that some folks are really on the ball and they're going to speed through it. And then other times folks are going to stutter in different areas and maybe not go everything. But I feel like I'm not sure what he would cut out to be like, man, if I want to make sure they got to the end, like, how would I do that? Because there's just some stuff. I think I guess what I'm saying is I think the content works for a one shot. I don't know. I would cut out a whole section. Some things just might go a little bit longer than others. And sometimes you have a little flexibility with, hey, can you stay later? And unfortunately we had a couple folks that had to leave pretty much on the button. Otherwise, maybe we would have been able to do everything kind of by the book, but it was a lot of fun. I liked the story that was told. I liked the barrow. I like the Dunlendings that had really nice flavor from the setting that I appreciated. There was a little bit more story that he shared afterwards that I was like, oh, that's really cool. Also, we just didn't get a chance to interact with it. There's definitely stuff we missed. We didn't really question people in the town enough. We could have called a council in the town and gotten some information that way by having one of these sort of like, we need to get everybody together and talk. But we didn't do that. I didn't really think about it. I think it's something, again, like I was mentioning before about, well, we don't know the system that well. And so knowing kind of these mechanical things to call upon, we don't know. So just like with using the sixes and some of the things in dice, just the ways you can interact with the mechanics, we don't know about. So we're playing at a low level, maybe a less efficient level than we could have been because we're just sort of not super familiar with the mechanics. I think there was another element with like, some of these larger things like, hey, you can engage with this system. We didn't really weren't aware of it fully. And that just goes to being new, being unfamiliar with the system, and it's, in all that stuff, right? I would maybe say, hey, as the referee, if you know about it, you could maybe suggest it, but you got a lot going on too. So you're trying to run things. So it's not a ding on anybody. It's like, oh yeah, if we'd played this more or we'd had a chance to read the rules, maybe we would have known like, oh, we should call a council here and do that. But it's definitely something that I would want to do the next time. Much like with the journeying and these other kind of things, like, yeah, I'd want to make sure, like, can we tap into these systems a little bit to get a flavor for it? I really like the system. I really like the adventure. I think Frederick did a great job running it. I think the setting is awesome. I love the setting, so it's always going to be one I'm like, man, I could always go back and play this, even just in the setting, just because I love the setting so much. I think the game does a good job. Mechanically, I think it works. It's a weird system because I think on paper I might think, man, that's a little bit clunky, but actually in play, I think it works. It works pretty well. Yeah, there's a little bit of math, but it's not too much. It's easy to see your advantages. It's kind of easy to figure out. You can't play the odds so much because it's like each one of your extra dice, those D6s you're rolling, right? It's a one. Your chance of rolling a 1 or a 6 are all the numbers are equal. So maybe that works well. You can't game it too much like you can with flat modifiers, where you can say, oh, I got a plus whatever. It's like, well, I have 3 dice, or sometimes we had 4 dice rolling, but that could be, you could be a plus 24 on one end or a plus 4 on the other end, and you don't know. So there's still some odds. And then if you start taking those 6s out, if you're lucky enough to roll them to maybe to do extra stuff like that, counters it, right? That goes into 2. So there's a lot of things that you could say, well, that's system mastery, which is true. But I think, on a basic level, I think it worked well and everyone got it. I think there's just that next level where we just need a little more familiarity with the rules, a little bit more time playing, and that would work. That would work really, really well. Like I said, I thought I got to use one of my class things. They're not really my class thing, right? I got to use one of my what did I use? I just used my travel. Like, this is really the one that came out. I mean, we got to use stealth a couple times because we're sneaking around in the dark and sneaking around things. So that worked out well. I was a messenger and didn't have a big impact on what we were doing. I mean, obviously what your calling helps give you certain skills, so that there's kind of a secondary. I mean, yeah, I'm not calling upon my calling, but my calling allowed me to be favored in both travel and stealth. Right. So it factored in, but not in a super obvious way, which I think is actually good, because it's more like, hey, I'm stealthy, or I'm good at traveling, whatever. And yeah, hobbits are sneaky. I think you start with 2, or maybe you might even start with 3 in stealth anyway. So hobbits are definitely sneaky, and we use that to our advantage. I even didn't really come into play, but I had my pony that I brought out for our when we fled the barrows, just because I hadn't used my pony, and I was like, I whistled on my pony, get the heck out of there. And then we were rolling checks, and I rolled really well. I think I rolled 2 6s on my check, so we had this funny moment of like this pony coming out of nowhere and me like hopping on it like Legolas, like leaping under the saddle and just taking off at a burst because of this, even though it's a half-starved pony, but it's there in the book that I can have one, so I took it. I think we ended up getting 1 shadow point because we had some interaction with the white. One of the things with the white, the way Frederick was playing it, I don't know if this is by the book, but he played it that it was a lot weaker during the day than at night. I think if we'd gone inside the barrow at night, it probably would have crushed us with the TPK, but it was more vulnerable because we were there during the day. And I don't know if that's just his interpretation or if that's in the books. I have no idea, but it made sense. We weren't thinking about it. We just went during the day because that was the next opportunity we had to do something. But it makes sense if we'd gone in there and gotten TPK'd and he said, oh, yeah, if you'd come during the day, it would have been weaker. I would have been like, yeah, totally makes sense. In the book, the hobbits are in trouble because it's getting to be sort of dusk and they tarry. The sun goes down, and that's when everything goes haywire for them in the barrows. So it totally makes sense that night would be when they're strongest. I didn't get to really I didn't fight at all. So I don't have anything to add about. I don't know about the damage, how that really was working, or how the armor and stuff worked. It just didn't enter into anything. And so we didn't really grab a bunch of stuff. So I didn't have to worry about load. So there's a lot of subsystems and things that we didn't have to worry about. I was fine with it. It was a fine thing. I think sometimes, I mentioned I played in that Cairn one shot where we didn't actually interact much at all with anything, particularly Cairn. And this one, we were really in the setting and everything of Lord of the Rings, but there were just some things of the system, the One Ring, that we didn't necessarily get into, but it was fine because we had fun. We never felt inhibited or unable to interact with what's going on. And that's really the most important thing, right? I think you want rules that help you with the theme and what the game's trying to do, but aren't trapping you if you're like, oh, you can't do this because whatever, or at least I don't really want that. Maybe some other folks are like, yeah, I want that. Not for me. And this game, it didn't do that. So it was just a matter of, yeah, we may be better or worse at it, but we can always roll that D12 and go. And just for myself, I didn't feel like I had a great sense with some of the checks of what our odds were. And I think part of that was the way Frederick was running some of his checks was actually very kind of OSR-ish, would be like, hey, I'm going to make a bunch of rulings. I'm not going to get too caught up in trying to do everything by the book so we can keep the flow. I think the good part of that was, yeah, everything was moving. We were moving. There was not any downtime of, I got to look it up in the book. I don't know if he's run the One Ring before or whatnot, but it really gave the game a really good flow because there was just none of that, right? It was just, oh, hey, do this or that. The other side of it, which you can mitigate, but in this case we didn't, was sometimes I was rolling and I wasn't sure what my odds were. And I told him that. I was like, just for me, if we have multiple options, sometimes it's good to know, like, well, if we do this, we have about this chance of working, or if we do this, well, that chance of working. I didn't really know that because we were being asked to roll, and the only thing if we rolled 12, that was great. But other than that, like, I had no idea what we were rolling at. And it just would help to know. And I think part of that was because he was kind of rolling more sort of generic checks and seeing kind of how well we did, which I think is, I know a lot of games that do that all the time, but I think for me, I was like, especially with the new system, I kind of want to, if you can tell me, hey, you want to roll above of this, or you want to roll above whatever, what we can bring into play, it would help just me to sort out for decision making what's good. But there wasn't a ton of that, but there was a little bit of like, I wasn't quite sure sometimes kind of what I needed to do. I think it's just a combination of him just running a kind of a free flowing game. And then also, so you're kind of moving away a little bit from the book rules for that part of it, which I don't mind, but it did make it a little bit more opaque, I think, at times. And so that made it it wasn't difficult to make decisions. Just I wasn't sure, like, did I do good or not? Or am I going to do good at that? And there's probably a good middle ground because I do like, overall, I would rather have the free flowing game than have the one where we're stopping because we're all kind of new and we're looking up stuff in the book. So kudos to Frederick. Kudos to the other players. Everyone had a good time. Everyone was kind of playing it in good faith. I mean, he'd sold the thing as, hey, come, we want to kind of try out the One Ring. And if we get enough folks that like it, maybe there'll be some kind of ongoing One Ring campaign that I'm totally down for. I don't know if The scheduling, whatever, is always going to be the bugbear. But yeah, I totally would and want to play more because I think there's a bunch of things in the system that aren't really going to you're not going to really see it in its full flower unless you play more, I think, or unless you play some kind of marathon session, or at least maybe a few sessions where you can travel and you can interact with Hope and Endurance and Shadow and all that stuff. I mean, Shadow Scars and your Shadow Path and all that stuff, and and gain some flaws, right? We just sort of tiptoed around that a little bit, but didn't get to play more. But it was a really good experience. So it was. It's always great to play games. Actually play the games that you're reading and stuff, and that so it's one of those ones like aspirational. I'm like, man, I want to play the One Ring. I want to play in this Lord of the Rings universe. So it was really great to do it, and I hope I get to do more of it. With all of that said, I gotta head out soon because I'm running my game tonight. And by the way, I'll just share this because it happens to be here. I made a character sheet today because I noticed I didn't have one. I'm hoping I'll have a chance to print these out to hand out for the game tonight. It looks like a lot, but it's actually not. All this stuff on the one side is just to handle because I have a dice pool, and there's one currency, which is strain, and strain basically forces you to take your dice and basically match up the strain. So all these squares are so that I tried to size them. So basically that's the size of your average D6, so that when you have dice and you gain strain, you could actually put the dice in the squares to show them how they're locked up before you free them. So that's what this whole side of the page is, just that. So if you take out this, which is just that to help make tracking strain very visual, because I've been playing this mostly in person, not online, and I think these visual things of having a bunch of dice and then showing like, oh, you got to put these dice in kind of dice jail, I think it just kind of is nice. And then this part down here is just to give the player, like, if they're confused about the callings or magic or whatever the choices are down here. So really your actual character sheet is just this bit here, which if you're just kind of writing out on hand and stuff, you could write on a note card. But I did it on the letter side so I can have the dice stuff. So I'm going to try to get these printed out. I'll have a play report about that, or a run report, I guess, tomorrow. Hey, Jason, cheers. But anyway, that's coming up. That'll be coming up. So it was great to talk about this. And, thanks again to Frederick, who also hosted the game at their apartment last night. So thanks for hosting, Frederick. Thanks for running the game. Thanks to the other players for playing it, making a fun experience. I had a great time. And that's all I got, folks. So enjoy the rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on, everybody. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.